June 8, 2021 council meeting to order. Yes, everyone please stand. Councilman Woods will give our invocation.
Oh, gracious and merciful Father, Lord, we thank you first and foremost, Lord, for this day. Father, we thank you, Lord, for life, health, and strength. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us to assemble together, Lord, as we continue, Lord, to look at our county, Lord, and try to make a better place for everyone to live, work, and play. Father, we use this as a time for you use your vision and allow us to be a vessel. These are all the blessings at your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Up next, we have approval of agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we'll set the agenda as written.
A motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Call our public hearing for ordinance 810, ordinance to establish a place local hospitality tax in Marlboro County, South Carolina. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, this is the public hearing for the third reading on this matter, and it's to impose a 1% sales tax on prepared food and beverages outside of the town limits in the county. This would have to go to a vote of the people, so all you're doing is making that possible, and the money would have to be used to things related to tourism and that sort of thing. So this, when you consider it down below, you're making it where it can be put on the ballot so the people can decide.
Comments from council?
It'll be on the ballot this year.
I think it'll be next
Next
Well, it
year.
actually is, this would adopt, it doesn't
Oh, okay.
require, a vote.
It does not?
No, this body.
Okay, I'm glad you spoke up.
It's
Okay.
2%, tax on prepared food and beverage outside.
Okay, I apologize. I gave you all bad information. And it would go into, it would not go
It will
into,
go into effect October 1.
okay.
Gives 3 months for the merchants to become advised and prepare investments.
And I think I'm right about this, is we would then give it to the Department of Revenue, who would tell, the people that collect sales tax.
Yes.
Okay, so I stand corrected. This would go on, convenience store that sells food, but it would be outside of the city of Bennettsville.
Outside of the city of Bennettsville. And of course, then they would actually send the payments. We would send the forms out to the merchants, and then the merchants would collect them on behalf. But of course, the Department of Revenue would be advised that the prepared food and beverage tax is in place throughout the unincorporated areas in Marlboro County.
And this would generate approximately $100,000 a year. So I apologize for the bad information. If you wanted to delay the third reading, you could, but it should have minimal impact on anyone. It's just added on to the, if you go get a chicken box at the convenience store, it's just going to add that 1% on there.
Any comments from council? From the public? All right, we'll close that public hearing. Ordinance 811 and 812, I guess we can just, both of those can be rescheduled for June 21st, 2021 at 5:30 p.m.
That's correct.
So both of those would go, the public hearing would go down. And so ordinance 814, ordinance ratifying, authorizing an allocation of certain revenues derived from one or more economic development projects located in Marlboro County, South Carolina, in joint county industrial business park between Darlington and Marlboro counties. Mr. Moore.
This is the companion to the tax incentives given to Domtar and this in Tatum and some other assets of Domtar. And this sets forth the distribution of those tax revenue back to like it was with the prior agreement. So council's already moved forward with renewing that agreement, and this just renews the part that tells the treasurer how to split the money. Excuse me.
Any comments from council? From the public? All right, we'll close these public hearings. Up next, approval of minutes for May 11th, 2021. Anybody see anything they need to add or correct, or look good?
I make a motion we'll set the minutes as written.
A motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, thank you. It's unanimous. Old business, operating budget update and discussion for 2021-22. Mr. Merman.
do this so everybody can see. Maybe the easiest thing to do is just stand over here. Sheriff, you might want to. I'm sorry. That's okay. Good one. Okay. Can you see? Can y'all see?
Yeah.
At your last meeting, we left off with, I showed you the budget and where we were proposing, staff was proposing it, and we left out saying we were going to work to reduce expenses and take out any extra that's in there and any expenses that could be taken care of with savings from this year would be done to save money for next year. And also to fine tune the revenue coming in. As you know, I always say, or have said since I've been here, that that's the hardest part. The expenses are pretty easy to figure out. We know how much copy paper we use or how much the light bill is. But how much is coming in changes from time to time. And of course, we had some requests last time and we listened to council, and some council members have spoken to me since then. So the bottom line was that we needed about $230,000 to balance the budget. And the way that we balanced the budget for the last, I guess, 4 years was to try to be at about $400,000 out of our reserve. And for whatever reason, there's some math in it, that usually seems to break even. Because you typically have some positions that'll stay vacant, you save a little money there, you save a little money here, and it ends up being enough to make you not come out of the reserve. So that's the goal. And to do that, it can be a combination of cutting expenses or finding or getting better information on revenue coming in. And of course, this goes up, this amount needed goes up if some budget requests are put in there. So where we left off, and I've used the same format for several years, and some of you all have expressed that you like to look at it that way. So this is where we were with expenses and revenue, and about 680 out of reserve. Well, that was more than the 450 we were trying to target. So there were some costs that, after discussions, were added in for the purposes of presenting tonight. One is something that's really not a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but something I think everyone can relate to, and that's ransomware and protection for our computers. I just watched on the way here, or when I went home, where the pipeline had been hijacked. Those are things that we need to protect ourselves from, and that costs money, so that's about $25. And then council has been good every year of doing a cost of living increase for employees, so we put in a 2% cost of living increase, but not starting it until February, so you save that little bit of money. Now, it'll come home to roost the next year, but for the purposes of this year, those were added in there. So what happens is that takes you back, that rides it up some, so you're at 765, which is going the wrong direction. So now that we have one, possibly 2 more months of revenue data, because when we first did the budget, we were working off what we had. Now we've got at least another month. Well, by having that, we were able to determine that, before I get to that, we tried to find savings, and one big savings we found that Mr. West and Ms. Doris Sumter worked on with a team of employees was to try to get our workers' comp premium down. And those of y'all who pay workers' comp know that can be an expensive insurance. And if you think about the fact that we have deputies and EMS people on our payroll, you know that that's a big part of a big cost for them. So they put it out for bid, and interestingly enough, found at least $50,000 savings, and ended up with the same coverage that we had before, the same company through the Association of Counties. So it never hurts to ask and keep everybody honest, and they found that money, so that was a good thing. We also had 2 years ago, I think, we started using enterprise rental car for sheriff's vehicles and public works vehicles. And we had one payment still rolling from the past way of doing it, where we would just borrow from the bank. So we were able to, that was paid off. So that cut it 50. So there's 100 we found. Then when we got into looking at revenue, because we had that more information coming in now, we determined that there was about $220,000 in revenue that we had not seen or were not confident of when we presented last time. One chunk of this is local option sales tax revenue. Now, there's two parts of that. One part is money that goes in the general fund. And we estimate that'll go up about $50,000 to make it about $550,000 if I remember right. So that's about 29% of the money that comes to us. 71% of that same pot of money has to be given back to the citizens to reduce their taxes. And so we can talk about that later, but that's not included in that because we can't spend that for this. We have to give that back. So this is a good thing. So that's where we are now. So now with that stuff in there, you can see we're about where we need to be, 445. Now, what that does not, and so what that does is puts us kind of where we always try to be, which is really need to be around 4, but it works out. So that's within the target that we've had over the past 4 years. The big request that's not included in that is a hot issue that the sheriff's office is interested in, and you all have expressed interest in. And that is the way that we pay overtime to detention center and detention center employees and sheriff's deputies. And it's kind of convoluted, but basically, the more overtime you work, the less you get paid per hour. Sounds insane. It's legal because it was negotiated and that was a deal put in place 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. But now in the modern world, that's not the kind of thing that's going to keep good employees working for us. So I ran some numbers here I thought was kind of interesting. If you look at the last 12 months of all the employees in these two departments, on average, sheriff's office folks are working 10.2 hours a week overtime. And some of them aren't working that much, and some of them are working a whole lot more than that. And they're getting paid at a rate of about half of their regular rate. So if they make $20 an hour or $10 an hour, they're getting paid half that for overtime. Detention center employees are working on average 25 hours a week, pay period. These are for pay period. So 12 and a half hours a week. And theirs came out on average to be about 0.4 times their regular rate. So you can understand how this is tough on somebody who's working on overtime. The sheriff's office stuff is primarily working cases, so they have overtime. The detention center has had a number of vacancies that have been hard to fill. And so you have folks working to cover shifts. So they're not just working late, they're working whole nother shifts. Now, council approved and the sheriff is involved in increasing the salaries in that department and in the sheriff's office. So we feel confident, we've talked to the sheriff some, that we'll be able to start finding people for those positions. So that's going to help bring that down. Because, I work in manufacturing, and when you have a busy time, people like to make overtime. But you can get to a point where people want to go home no matter what you pay them. Working 24 or 5 hours a pay period gets old quick. So this is sort of the numbers, these are the numbers behind that. So if you look at it all together, this is for that 12 months, so you can see the number of hours they all work together and how much money they receive for overtime. It's $56,000. If they were paying time and a half for the same number of hours, it'd be $226. So the difference is $170,000. So $170,000 is what would be needed to fix it. Now, what that means is, if you were to say, well, use the reserve we have. Well, you heard me say, and I know council members, at least the ones that have been here for a while, have been involved in this before, not to use the reserve to pay recurring expenses. If you start paying things that are going to happen every year out of the reserve, you won't have a reserve. It's a dangerous way to go. And it would mean that the reserve expenditure for next year would be around $615, which is out of the whack of that target you're trying to hit. So staff recommendation is that you need to find new money, and that means taxes. And so to do this would be about 3 tax mills. A tax mill brings in, $65,000. You might could round that to 2.5. We can see, but this is what staff recommends, and staff doesn't like to recommend a tax increase. But I don't know of any better reason better purpose than to take care of law enforcement and the job that they do. So that's it in a nutshell. And what we would need to do at the next meeting is, between now and then, is, or tonight, to find out what you all think. And then I've already met with the sheriff some, and we would come together with how he plans to structure his overtime. So, because y'all privately shared, we don't want to write a blank check and it go out of whack. From what he's told me, I feel like that it'll be fine, and it'll maybe even go down a little bit, but we have to plan for the max. So, Mr. Chairman, that's where we are with the budget. And assuming everybody's in agreement with the two smaller items we added, what we need to know about is, what staff needs to know to move forward is what to do with this issue here.
Questions, comments from council? On the 3% tax mill, that once a year, so let's say your property tax is $100,000. I mean, the property value is $100,000. What would be the increase in?
Well, it would be, I guess that's something we should figure. It would be 4,000
times 3 mils would be about $12. Yeah.
So $12 a year on $100,000.
Okay.
On principal residence.
On your legal residence.
On legal
Be a
residence.
little more if it's 6% on a business. So, it's
What would require us approving the 3 tax measures? Is that something that goes before?
No. What the way it would work is, y'all would approve the budget next time, and if you want this in there, it'd be in there, and then the budget then authorizes us to set the millage enough to pay for what you've approved, and then in August, typically you also would vote again on the millage. Staff would go out and figure out what it needs to be, and then come back to you. So the way we've usually done it is, if it's council's desire, put it in the budget, and then the rest would come from that.
One other question, and maybe or the sheriff can answer this question. We shorted at the detention center. By how many employees are you short? Or the detention short 5, 4, 6?
Yes.
So we had 6 more employees. The overtime will be pretty much eliminated or reduced. I know it'd be reduced, but
It would be reduced tremendously.
we can't find nobody want to work. Hard to find work. And you gotta be 21. You gotta be 21 years of age or 18. And the starting pay for officer is entry level. Off the top of your head, do you know?
Doris is behind you, I think.
24, I think.
Ask Doris right there.
26.5.
So, yeah, you all made a big jump to make that a competitive wage. And the hope is, you start to attract people that maybe come out of the state system, or start to get people that'll stay.
My thinking is simply, I don't want to lock that 170,000 in, because as the sheriff, it may need an increase for next year. Are we prepared to do the increase as well? Because I know he has to manage it, but other than that, I say let's do this. But I don't want to just hoodwink him, just keep him shut out. I want him to be versatile.
It's the same thing. We don't want to do the same thing to our citizens. We don't want to do a 3% tax meal this year. Then next year we back at the same thing. So we need 3 more.
Yeah.
It may not be.
Yeah, I think, but Dr. Devil Advocate, if we do 3, and for some shape, form, or fashion, Mr. Muller come back and say, well, we still short people. We need 3 more. And then the citizen gonna look at us and say, well, why we ain't do 4 or 5 one time and bite the bullet one time instead of doing, this 3 and then next year, if we don't need it, we have it in the reserve. The reserve will be low. We always have it approved. And that's just my thought. We're gonna do an increase. I better just do it once.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
Well, I
Instead of
mean,
doing back to back years.
getting back to what you said is the numbers come from what? I guess they took the previous year's overtime and kind of a number, so it would look like it would try to average out to move forward, and that's where you would get the 3 tax mills, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of an average where you would go with what was worked, a 12-month period. Is that correct? For last 12 months?
I think
That
trying
shows
to
you
hear
3
what all
months.
3 of y'all are saying, I think something you said earlier kind of helps explain that, is that if you fill those spots, full-time spots, you probably don't have savings there. And you would hope that that savings is enough to carry if it goes over. You know, it's I don't want to say it's a guessing game, but it is. He doesn't know how many murders he's going to have, lost children and all that. And, you know, that's why you have a reserve. I mean, I wouldn't want to come in here and say, like you're saying,
Right.
3 mills, and it turns out to be 6 mills.
Right.
But we don't think that's the case.
Okay.
I think probably the give and take of hiring those full-time people is going to make it work out.
When the sheriff does hire those full-time people, and they come in at 26,000, you're talking about 6 people, you know.
That's already in the budget.
Huh?
We budget vacant spots.
You
That's all
put it for
taken
vacant
care
spots, so that's already in there.
of. All taken care
But
of.
what I do know is that this overtime situation is a power keg, to be honest about it. And it's something needs to be done to rectify that situation, whether we do the full increase or find some other ways, but that's something that needs to be, I think, something we need to tackle.
I agree. I think the sheriff detention center needs some help, but you know how I am about taxes. I'd rather go up at least we can this year, and if we've got to go up again next year, let's do it that way, because once you go up, they don't come back down. They're there. And if we see we need it, we can do it next year. But, you know, I never say do more. Let's do what we got to do, especially after this COVID. Let's don't go up any more than we got to this year. And then next year we got to go up 2 more percent, let's just do it. But, and that's the way I feel. That's my thoughts on it.
Where does the limit come in?
Well,
Yeah.
let me speak to that.
It's a little bit complicated this year because we've actually got reassessment. So what happens with reassessment, we can actually do a 3-year look back. And we can do it this year because of the reassessment, we had some increases that were not implemented. So it's kind of a cumulative of 3 years worth of what's referred to as CPI, or Consumer Price Index. And that is provided to us by the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office in Columbia. But anyway, our limit without that provision is only 1.23%. Inflation was very low this past year. So it was, if it wasn't for reassessment, we would have been limited to probably just a little bit over $1 million in terms of an increase, because in order to charge a higher, you would have had to have a prior year deficit to recover. But because of reassessment, we can actually do a 3-year look back, and that percentage is close to probably around 4.5%.
We're bumping on the max.
At that. It is, and we may see next year that limit will be certainly greater than 1.2%.
So we wouldn't be able to do 3 mil next year.
Well, it depends on whatever the consumer price index, whatever the inflation is for the 21 calendar year.
But you'd have to have crazy inflation to be able to do 3 mills again.
Yeah.
The 3 mills here would be covered by 3 years worth of that inflation that's built up. You can look back 3 years. The only other way you can increase it is if you ran a deficit the prior year, you can recover that. There's certain things, but this would pretty much eat up what's built up.
Correct.
But you also lose that, you know, it's count 3 years back, so you lose a year every year you don't use it.
Right.
So it's not like you need to save it. Because if you had a catastrophic event, you know, if you had a deficit, any of those things that have been used in the past, you'd be able to raise, you've got the ability to raise.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overtime for the deputies is I mean, I think it is important, but you know, so is a 3 mil tax increase on our citizens. So it's something for us to think about to our next meeting. And so it would be really would really hope the sheriff would really keep a real close eye on whatever it was, and I know he would, but I mean, it's a tax increase, but I think it would be a important tax increase to make sure, they are our public safety whenever we call, and so, but, on the other end, whenever, if they don't ever need them, all they look at us is the taxes we go up. So we want to make sure that, I mean, that's the nature of the beast. I mean, and, as Mr. Blackman said, is, we hate to put that burden, but sometimes that burden is needed to keep you qualified people. So, I mean, it's a thing we'll, we really, I think, look at. We got a couple weeks to really talk and figure out for sure, but, we don't want it to, as Dr. Johnson said, just explode into a powder keg. So it's really one of the manageable things that we'll have to see, and at least we can see what was done for the last to kind of give a recommendation to go forward. So I think that's some good advice.
It's important to know too for the new folks that this was the result of an agreement with the employees and the county 10 years ago. So it is some kind of misapplication of the overtime law. I mean, it's amazing to me that it can work like that, but it is legal. And for it to, if you did do the change, we would have to petition the court to create an agreement to do it, to fix it. So it is, which also creates an exemption for village agreement.
It was contractual.
Well, it's like a contract. It's like a court order that says y'all are going to pay this way and pay that way. And so at that time, everybody signed
It
off.
was a court order, or?
It was like it was a legal agreement between the employees impacted and the county.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, but that's how it was.
Yeah, that's definitely not the way the law states overtime should be paid. So
Yeah.
if we enter into an illegal contract, that's still.
No, it's legal. We have labor attorneys. It's
Yeah.
legal. We're not doing anything. I don't want anybody to think we're doing anything illegal, Councilman Strode.
Right.
Plenty legal has been practiced by the county all around us, and they just recently, in recent years around us, went to this. It's been reviewed umpteen times by labor lawyers and all. It's completely legal. I don't want anybody to think that. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right way of doing it.
Yeah, it's definitely not right.
On that kind of side of it. Okay, well, what I'm hearing, because I want to make sure I do what you all want, is to, I guess we can meet the sheriff, we can talk about, things he has in place and a better estimate of how it'll come out if we fill those detention center jobs, how the impact that'll have. And then at your called meeting, if you want to meet with the sheriff and staff, and we can kind of tell you where you are. And we can be prepared to adjust the millage and the amount right then, right there.
I think that would be best. Yeah, I mean, we got a little bit of time, so, you wait till the very hour.
I just want to be fair to the citizens and everybody,
Right.
And, that's the thing, we obligated them to, we can go up next year if we need to. I mean, so let's just do what we have to get us back on track and then go from there again. It's what I really think is the best all the way around for everybody.
I think that's an important statement, Mr. Blackman, because we have some citizens that are paying taxes that really don't think they're getting the benefit from their own tax paying responsibilities. And so if we're talking about increasing the taxes for them, and they're already dissatisfied with the services they're receiving, and we create more problem for us as council members to be able to engage with our constituents.
That's why I agree that we need to let them know we can do everything in our power to keep their taxes down. And we are. Since I've been on here, I will say that. And we're trying to do the best we can with our money, and we have done a great job. And I think we need to keep it in line as we go. And if we need to do more next year, let's do more. But, let's keep it to what's gonna make detention center, sheriff's department work. I want it to work, but if we can get down to 2.5, let's do 2.5, you know, okay. That's what
Yeah. All right. Well, I think you'll have time, a little bit of time between now and our next meeting to, look and see exact those numbers if they'll just give a ballpark so we can, I think would be, I think it'd be good to have a meeting with the sheriff before our next meeting, that way we can hear both sides and really make a good sound judgment on that.
Okay, so the other parts, I'm sorry.
Maybe comp time or something else to
We don't want to
engage
do
that
comp
overtime.
time. Comp time's a nightmare, and, I mean, you could do straight time. I mean, my professional recommendation is either fix it or don't fix it, because you'll just be right back at it. I think from what we're all saying,
Yeah.
what y'all are saying, the real question is the impact of the detention center if you can hire some people. And if there's any impact from sheriff scheduling or, those sort of things. I think the detention center is where the savings can be if we can fill those spots. That's where you get half a bill back. And you haven't raised these type millages in 3 years now. And for a while, we'd have to, when I was on council too, we'd have to sit on Mr. Blackman and we did what we had to do. So sometimes it comes up. So we'll do those things though and be prepared for you all at the next meeting on the 21st.
Any more discussion from council on that?
We good?
I think we're good. Thank you, Mr. Moon. Up next, ordinance 810, ordinance to establish and collect local hospitality tax in Marlboro County, third reading. And this was the public hearing we heard a little bit ago about, I guess it would take effect in October 1. And so if it's past third reading, it does not have to go to a vote on the referendum, so it would be our sole discretion to do that. So this is up for third reading. Do we have a motion for third reading for? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. There's a little bit more dollars for not really our tax-bearing people, but I mean, a lot of people come through that buy stuff at these convenience stores, out-of-town people that will help carry the burden. I mean, of us of what we do with our money. So that'll be bringing some outside money in. It's not just our landowners. Ordinance 814, ordinance ratifying and authorizing the allocation of certain revenues derived from one or more economic development projects located in Marlboro County, South Carolina, joint county industrial and business park between Darling and Marlboro County's third reading. And this is the public hearing, the same public hearing we talked about earlier. So this will be third reading. We have a motion for it. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. I guess 815, 816, and 817. The last two times we did them all together, it was 815 was to establish the Marlboro County Library Board. 16 was to establish the Marlboro County Historic Preservation, and 17 was established the Marlboro County Planning Commission. And if I'm correct, that's just to get them all in line with like the rest of our boards, correct?
Yeah, this came as a result of Mr. Stroman's request, and it's a good request to make it to where for these boards, you all appoint somebody from your district, but they don't have to live in your district. So that's the gist of it.
So we can combine all three of those, what are legal. So do we have a motion for all three of them?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept orders on 815, 816, and 817.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, thank you. Up next, new business, discussion requirements of solar farm developments. Mr. Moon.
Stand back up, if you don't mind. We've had, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've probably had 10 or 12 different times that people interested in starting a solar farm have come to the county, asking questions, looking for tax benefits, those sort of things. And most of the time, about 95% of the time, nothing really comes of those. The way it generally works is a company will be will go out and they'll find a piece of land and they'll figure out how to get that land, you know, on an option or controlled or buy, and they'll figure out how to run the power lines to it and get everything in place, and then they'll go sell that to, Duke Power or Co-op or whoever. So you have a lot of people speculating, I say, on it. And, but there are some that seem to be serious, and when we saw this coming, the staff has been working for the past 6 months, 6 or 8 months, on making sure we have rules in place that will, as much as possible, protect the people that live around it and near it. You know, these things, if you've seen them, you know, they look like a sheet of glass out across the field. You know, as you all know, Marlboro County doesn't have very restrictive zoning, so you don't have a lot of zoning rules that say this has to go here, and this can only be a farm, and this can't be a business or that sort of thing. But what we can work on and present to council are rules that govern the development of solar farms in a manner that would help protect people. And so we have an ordinance that's all but done, and I want to go over the basic parts of it so you'll understand. And if you have any questions, we can work on it some more. So if someone were to come and they said, I've got 100 acres and I want to build a solar farm, you know, they would have to come up with a plan, and they'd have to bring that plan to the planning commission, who would then review it. Very similar to the subdivision ordinance we spoke of before that's already in place. So they have to show what their intent is, how they would line it out, how they would do it. There are requirements for solar panels if we pass this ordinance, and those include things like they have to be, the actual panels have to be 50 feet from a property line. They have to be 200 feet from a residence. And we're trying to clarify whether that means measure from the house or measure from the line where a house is. We'll find that out. So you have to have that setback, can't be right up on somebody. Probably one of the more important things is there has to be a buffer, and a vegetative buffer. There has to be plants, trees, shrubbery that has to be at least 4 feet tall and must reach 100% of the panel height within 3 years. Okay, so if a panel is 8 feet off the ground, when they start out, they've got to buy plants that are at least 4 feet tall. Which, you know, that costs, y'all know, if you go to Lowe's, it costs more money to buy mature plants. And within 3 years, those plants have to have grown enough where you can't see those solar panels. And it talks about how they're to be staggered so that you can't see through them, all these kind of things. So that, you know, if it's next to houses, it gives you that protection. There also has to be a buffer if it's up against a pond or a lake or a river. There does not have to be a buffer in where we are now if it's against non-residential. So if it backs up to a business or something, they're not required to do that. The other important part is what they call decommissioning. So there's concern that someone comes in and puts one of these in, and 10 years from now, the technology's out of date, you know, it's just like a computer, you know, and somebody abandons it and leaves a field full of stuff that's, you know, just sitting there. Well, this ordinance would set forth rules in which they have to come in and remove everything. It talks about if there's a continuous 6-month period where there's no electricity being generated, then they're forced to come in and remove everything. So, in summary, this is
Would that be the landowner or the solar people?
I think it would be the solar people,
Okay.
but we'll clarify that. Doug, you're going to remember that. We'll clarify that.
As a landowner, they normally sign like a 20-year lease with.
So whoever's applying for the permit probably, but we'll get an answer on that. But aside from zoning, you know, which, you know, if you were to go out and we were to ask the planning commission to come up with zoning that says Mr. Woods can't use his property he owns except for this, or Mr. Blackman for this, this is the best method of making sure somebody isn't irresponsible and comes in and puts a mess in there that you can see or leaves it there. Now, you know, this council has discussed zoning before. You know, the difficulty with that is that folks are concerned about things that are near them, but at the same time don't want you to tell them what to do with their land. So that could be revisited. But we feel like staff wants to recommend to y'all that at the next meeting, and it could be that meeting on 21st, that you start reading an ordinance that puts these rules in place. This comes from other counties that have already done it. It's been reviewed or being reviewed by our lawyer that does that. And we feel like it's the right thing to do to protect people as much as the law allows the county to protect people. Between Ms. Carabo and I, we can try to answer any questions about it.
So, Mr. Williams, so I can build a subdivision, put 100 houses out there. 2 years later, I still have 100 acres. I can actually now fill that up with solar panels, even though I sold a bunch of property to landowners, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. That property wouldn't be.
No, I mean, unless you had a zoning change, and even then, they could ask for a variance, they could come ask for an exception. But county doesn't have, nobody, aside from zoning, has the ability to go in and tell someone what to do with their land aside from zoning, or something like this, which isn't the best solution, but it is probably the maximum.
I thought you could have restricted property,
You
selling
can.
as restricted property.
You can.
And nobody could move, like you could move an industry on near, or you could move a hog facility near,
Well, you can have deed restrictions, but that's a private transaction. So if I sold you, if like you said, if I had land and I made a subdivision, and I could put in the deed that you can't put but, whatever on the land, then you'd have an ability to go sue the original landowner and try to get them to not do that. But that's a private transaction. It's not something.
Sort of like a restricted covenant.
Exactly. That's the term you'd use.
So the county has no zoning.
The county has zoning, but it's very general, and we can bring that to y'all so you can, especially you new folks, so you can see that. But it's very general, meaning it's very broad. It has some restrictions about things like junkyards or, racetracks or, stuff like that. But it does not have anything about solar panels in it.
I hate to bring this back up, but I seem to remember somebody wanting to bring in a junkyard to Marlboro County, and some citizens got upset about that, and the county was able to block that. But
No.
No, only thing that you'd block was whatever, if it doesn't fit in, if it does not fit in the zoning that's there now, they can't come in. Yeah, if it was, I don't know what all our zoning is, because I think it's, about 4 categories of zoning?
Now, the county spent $1 million to block a landfill.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and it's not permitted in the zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
Landfill is not permitted in the zoning. So solar panels, and I have nothing against solar panels as
Right.
long as they're not near citizens. And I know that this person already sold the land, so the transaction has already been started. And that can open up a legal can of worms if the county now tried to stop
Right.
it. But however, those citizens still have a right to not have something like that so close to their residence.
It's a difficult situation as we become more modern, and you've seen this in more city areas where they have more strict rules, but we haven't had those. And that's something certainly y'all could consider. It would go through the planning commission and do that. But the challenge has always been, should government go tell somebody you can't use your land, but for whatever? And so the solution typically is to do something like this, where you say, well, you can put it there, but you got to have this 50 to 200 foot buffer so I don't see it, or I don't hear it, or it doesn't have a smell, or that kind of thing.
You can't get too far out where nobody wants to buy land and take it for the investment either. So you got to have some kind of happy medium there, which buffers and, fencing in some cases, and pine tree buffer, you know what I'm saying, whatever, where it can't be seen. So, but you got to be kind of careful because, not have somebody come in and want to invest $10 million in some of our land, and there ain't nothing they can do with it. So you got to be spaced out in the country.
That is the big drawback to those things that I've done quite a bit of research on myself, and they walk away from it. You got a piece of land that's virtually worthless, because the way they set those solar panels in, concrete in the fields and set the posts and everything, the land is virtually worthless, if they walk away from it, so that's something, you're right, we need to address that.
Is there any economic benefit we get by having someone?
Sure, they pay taxes. Y'all have given tax incentives for a very large one that's going to be out in the country near McCall, but it's out in the country. Yeah, they pay taxes, and because it's equipment, the taxes are, are a decent amount. They don't hire anybody, but they certainly have a benefit. And then, of course, we had an economic development partnership meeting this morning, and Andy Rogers, who is head of Palmetto Brick, they put in solar panels, and they supply 25% of their electricity off of solar. So it's green, energy. I was talking to Miss Purley on the phone, it's kind of like nobody wants a cow farm right up against their house, but everybody wants to eat a hamburger. It's tough because you want to protect where you are, so how do you balance those things? And what we brought to you from the staff perspective is about as much as we feel like legally you can do without changing zoning.
One in Darlington County, the large amount, doesn't it generate like $1.5 million tax a year?
Yeah. But that's the benefit is property tax and green energy.
I don't mind doing that, but I don't want to do it under the citizens' expense. Citizens are nervous. Nobody has come to the citizens and explained to them the safety of solar or anything about solar. So all kind of, feelings about that in their neighborhood is up, even though if it's $100 million, $100 billion, who cares if you're going to get sick?
I've seen solar, you go to North Carolina, they have a lot of them. I think they were a lot different in South Carolina, they were, it was a big thing generating a lot, I think that's, as you said, education about it is a good thing, and if we can do anything is to protect, is the buffers and what we can do, the ability we have to actually protect as much as we can our citizens, what we want to do. So if it's buffers or this and that, that's what we
There's certain places you just don't want them.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to fix it where they can't put them. That's, so, and you got to, that's what we have to figure out, because it's going to go both ways like that, so.
Well, you don't want to, the particular one you're talking about, there's no open building permit for doing it. So nobody's officially come and filed a building permit or anything. So you're not doing anything against anybody. So, because you wouldn't want to do that, and you wouldn't want to say that out loud, because that's not what you do.
Right.
But what it will do is if you have a small piece of property, and somebody says, well, I got 25 acres on the Salem Road next to the substation, by the time you do the buffers and all that, you make it where it's probably not going to work for people. So in this situation, that Ms. Purley and all and folks here are worried about, it's sort of surrounded by houses now. So you're getting a smaller piece of land, so it may impact those. But the bigger ones out in the country, I don't know how you could do anything about that.
Any more discussions or comments for?
As council, Mr. Chairman, are y'all comfortable with us bringing an ordinance to you to do as much as we can, and for y'all to start reading, and then we can refer it again to the Planning Commission and tell them we want to at least make a look at some zoning things and see, and then y'all can get a report from them.
Yeah, I think that's what we want to do, and I hope if they do build some of these things, and I think there's one going in McCall is to get as much knowledge as you can about anything, but we don't want to deter anybody from using a piece of property out in the county that nobody goes around, nobody sees, that could generate some tax dollars for us. But what we worried about is our in your backyard saying, so if we can do that, I think that would be good if you could bring that ordinance, we can start reading it and putting it on the table.
And at the end of the lease, who is responsible for the cleanup?
The commission.
Let's put it to where it's going to be cleaned up.
Right.
And it's in there too, I was looking as y'all were talking, that if you have one and you sell it, you get out and you sell it, it follows it. Because, you know, you've seen situations like, I don't know if y'all go to Rockingham much, but in East Rockingham, 15 years ago, all those mills they tore down and then they left it there.
Right.
Well, they sold it to somebody for scrap and then it never got cleaned up. So this follows, you know, if Ken Stroman bails out and sells it to somebody, it goes after them too. So we'll make sure that it's as strict as the ones we've seen around us to protect people as much as the law will allow us to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Up next, approval of renewal of detention center inmate healthcare service contract with Medico. Is that it, Mr. Malone?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, this is something we renew frequently, and this provider has done a good job for us, and we want to continue the service with them. If you remember, we had to change providers 2 years ago, and this was the one we chose, and they're still doing a good job. So we'd ask you to renew it.
Well, we have a recommendation from staff.
So move.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. American Recovery Act update, Mr. Mullin.
Mr. Chairman, this is an interesting one. You know, as you know, we are to get money from the federal government in the amount of about $5 million. And today we received half of that. It magically appeared in the bank account. The issue is that we, along with other counties, are having to figure out what's allowed to use it for. There are very general rules from the federal government, and if you've ever dealt with federal government, they don't make things in plain language. So trying to figure that out. And, you know, if you remember early on, we talked about things like putting rock on dirt roads where we don't have it, those kind of things. We're not sure that we can do that. We also talked about using it for recreation. We're not sure that we can do that. We may be able to use it for tourism, and how do you make the recreation tourism? You know, those are things we have to figure out. We have until 2024 to spend the money, so we're okay. It's going to be in the bank. They allow you to put it in an interest-bearing account, so it'll make interest. $5 million makes, you know, a little bit of interest. And then as we, Mr. Parks and I, figure out what can be allowed, and that'll happen because all the counties in the whole U.S. are in the same boat. I think there's 65,000 counties. That's not right, is it?
$65 billion that,
That's a lot of money. And that money's going straight to the counties, whether the cities, it goes through the state, I believe. Yeah, so that's where we are with that, and we're hoping that it loosens up some. Now, what I'd like to bring up tonight is that one way we know that you can use it is to modify facilities to have safe, no-contact type access to services, which is exactly what council approved to do with the Carolina Bank Building. So if you were to approve use of the American Rescue Plan money to do that bank building, then you can take that money, put on the bank building, and write recreation on it, and put it back in the reserve. So you can't use it for recreation, but you can use that same money that you had taken out of your regular reserve with no restriction and put it back in there and write recreation on it. And we feel like staff at least feels like that's what you ought to do. It creates at least $500,000 of seed money to do recreation like council wants. And it also takes this money that's sort of fallen out of the sky and uses it for something that we know is allowable. It's also a good thing from our perspective because as we get bids on this thing, if y'all bought any material lately, it'll allow us to see if that's going to settle down, because now the cost of doing this over here and doing it to this plan's specific rules is going to be more than $500,000. And you can say I told you so, Councilman Woods. But this money is specifically allowed for that, so we know that's something you could use it for. So what staff would be recommending you all is if you would consider a vote to use the rescue plan money to do that and take the money you had previously approved, put it back in the bank with recreation written on it. To me, it seems like it achieves what two different groups of council people wanted. It achieves both of those.
And that money carry over budget year to budget year?
Yeah, it can.
I like the idea, of taking that 500,000 and put it back in recreation, labor up on the recreation, and use, this money that dropped out of the sky for the building. But also, we definitely, to me, I think we need to make sure we already allocated in our mind 500,000. We already say it's gonna be more, but we need to, make sure we put a ceiling on it. I don't think we need to say, well, we got this $2.5 million, now we're gonna put a whole $1 million in it, you know, $750,000. I think we need to, if we decide to go that route, you know, we still need to, put a ceiling, or at least a plexiglass to a dollar amount. You know, like I said, we know the material is so much higher, so we know 500,000 is already too low. But how much more are we willing to go over to achieve our goal at the Old Carolina Bank? But like I said, the 500,000 going back to recreation would be a good seed money to do what we need to do.
We feel like, you know, what we would ask is $700,000. It's probably about $650, but that's what we would ask, is that if you'd consider, you know, using American Rescue Plan funds to purchase and renovate the building, not to exceed $700, and that the fund balance previously approved for this amount of $500,000 be returned to the fund balance and restricted for future capital recreation projects. So 700 would be the number you're seeking.
It sounds like a win-win to me. I mean, the best use, and we can use it for that, you know. Now, if you heard anything about the other 2.5, I mean.
It's coming.
It's coming, okay.
We thought you were supposed to get it all because of our population decrease or something, but, you know, it's coming. I mean, you know, it's like Christmas when you go look and see what Santa Claus came, you know, we like look at the bank account and, hey, there's $2.5 million. So it's on the way. No doubt we'll get that.
Is there any way that you get staff to take a look at using some of those funds for our essential workers, our county deputies that work during this pandemic? They haven't got any type of hazardous pay, not even $100, you know?
Well, that's certainly
I don't know
something.
whether the money can be used for that, but if it can, essential workers, I would love to give them something for the hard work that they've done for this county over this period.
That's certainly something council can consider. You know, it's at least, I think that it's important to take care of essential workers like we're talking about doing here, but I think a significant part of this, at least my recommendation would be to use something that's going to pay back too. So, you know, where you've got something that has a long-term impact on the condition of the county. So, you know, maybe you can do both. I don't know. But those are the things that we would be bringing to y'all and recommending. Of course, y'all have, you know, you can discuss it and come up with what you think.
Comments? I say any more comments from council? So would you like for, I mean, we would probably need to vote that we should
You gotta
secure
vote.
that money for that's in the budget this year, since it was labeled for that building. We could reverse that with the vote tonight to say, it would label it for recreation. That way we secure it so it can carry over to the next budget year. It wouldn't be for a building, and it would be for recreation, and used up to $700,000 of the American Recovery Act update for the building renovations.
Yeah, I mean, I've written a motion. If the motion passes, then that does that. If the motion doesn't pass, then what you've already done sticks. You know, it's like that. The motion would be to approve the use of American Rescue Plan funds for the purchase and renovation of the former Carolina Bank building in an amount not to exceed $700,000. Fund balance previously approved for this project in the amount of $500,000 shall be returned to the fund balance and restricted for future capital recreation projects.
Mr. Muller, we voted on the purchase of the proposed purchase. Is that something that was etched in stone? Are we ironclad to that?
Yeah, we signed a legal contract, yeah.
I think this is the best scenario that we could do. I mean, as Mr. Wood
Right.
said a while ago, that, you know, we got the money that fell out of the sky that we were needing to do for the building that could reverse it and give us a seed money for something that's been dear to all of us for the recreation. You know, we didn't have a start or nothing so we would at least have a start, you know, for something. I mean, that's,
So we're putting 500,000
yeah,
into recreation.
for a capital, like for the capital project or whatever we talk about, yeah, for whatever. It's like a win-win for both things. I mean,
Yeah, I don't really know how it
Yeah,
could
I
be
mean,
any
it's
more than
like,
what
I
you
mean,
guys
it's-
wanted that didn't
Yeah.
support it before. It puts that money where you wanted it, and it uses money that we weren't counting on to do something that I, quite frankly, even more than when we first proposed it, feel there is a need for. Over here, the
So-
drive-through.
So, but, I mean, he read a motion, he read a recommendation, that could be a motion, if somebody makes a motion on the recommendation for the,
I make the motion that we accept the recommendation.
a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any noes? All right, we have one no, so it passes, thank you. So, that's good, I mean, I'm just glad that we can have it, you know, when money's just falling, you can, you know, it's good to be able to do some things that we needed to do, and like I said, kind of gives you excitement about we've got something to start with for recreation. I mean, so it could be whatever, so hopefully that, and I think we're gonna get hopefully some little money from local option sales tax, or maybe, I mean, who knows? I mean, hopefully we're on the up and up, so that's gonna be good, so thank you. Up next, appointments to boards and commissions. I have Ms. Corey Plather sent an email indicating she would like to appoint Ms. Kathleen Jackson, is that correct, to the library board for District 4. And Ms., here I have Ms. Jackson's address. Was there any more appointments to boards and commissions?
Question, do I have to make my reappointment?
I think that's a good question, because I don't know that we